He said, when you don't get what you wanted, you got experience. Because you learn more from your mistakes than you do your successes. You really do. And he got mad and stormed into the office to the other two partners. And he said, I want that guy the hell out of my class. He keeps interrupting my lesson. And I'm standing in the doorway and he says, why don't you fix your lesson plan? And he goes, and the other two partners says, we can't kick him out of the class. Why not? He bought 1/3 of the firm the day he joined. He's a partner. Our focus became on, we'll match or beat the market. We'll cut your taxes in half through tax planning. And I found out pretty quick, clients never leave when you do that because their CPA's not doing that. When your children want something, make a project out of it. Have them do their due diligence. Have them look into it. And you'll raise a child that when it's time to go buy a car, he's reading up on all the specs. You know, he went to JCPenney's and the boys all got a wallet, the girls got a purse. And I remember sliding that little wallet and putting my first wallet in my pocket. And I remember the speech. With this library card, you can do or be anything you'll ever want to do or be. And in America, it's free.
This is Eagle Freedom Presents Showtime.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Here's your host, Deston Rogers.
And welcome once again to another episode of Eagle Freedom Presents. I am your host, Deston Rogers. Thank you very much for joining me. Here at Eagle Freedom Presents, we bring guests onto the show who exemplify our mantra of rise, inspire, and overcome, and help us to expand our REO movement. My guest today is a 7-year Marine veteran. He is a seasoned entrepreneur of over 30 years and a 20-year veteran of the financial services industry. He is the founder of the Q Companies. He's been featured in Forbes magazine. And he is joining us today to share how we can gamify our financial future. Would you please welcome to the show, Mr. Kevin Brunner. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you know, we've had a chance to connect on the phone, and your knowledge of the financial industry and the way you explain it and how fun it can be is amazing. But before we get there, one thing I like to do is I like to start off by giving my audience a background of who it is that we're talking to. So can you tell us a little bit about Kevin Brunner in the early years?
In the early years, well, my 12th birthday, Grandpa, my dad's dad, took me to Sears and Roebuck. Remember Sears, the old Sears? Yeah, I think they're mostly gone now, right? And he said, what do you want for your birthday? So I walked back to the sporting goods section. I pointed at the Schwinn Santana 10-speed. And it was bright yellow. You know, it was beautiful 10-speed. I said, I want that 10-speed. He says, okay, I'm going to show you how to have all the 10-speeds you'll ever want. And that confused me. And I said, well, I just want that one. And he says, no, follow me. So he goes over to the home and garden section and he pulls out this commercial lawnmower, you know, the 2-piston one, the one you have to pull the thing 3 times to kind of wind it up because it has a spring that helps you start it because you can't start it by hand, right?
Yeah, right.
You know, and he starts loading the oil because remember we used to have to mix the gas and the oil, you know?
Yep.
And
I definitely remember that.
Yeah, and he loads a rake. And remember the old edgers that you had to push that had a roller and a blade and a little sawtooth blade? And he grabs an edger and he starts loading stuff on top of this lawnmower. And I'm like, Grandpa, what are you doing? Now, he was a very distinguished man from you know, his family is from Zurich, Switzerland. And he had this, he just had this, I don't know, distinguished look about him. And he had this, you know, unique voice. And whenever he would speak to us, there was just respect. There was just respect. You remember back in the day, you did what your grandparents said. You didn't question it.
You definitely did that. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So he was a very kind, very thoughtful man. He'd explain things to you and stuff. And I said, Grandpa, what's with the lawnmower? And he goes, oh, he says, you'll see when we get outside. So he loads this all up and I'm all confused. We check out, we go out to his truck. He drove the same old Chevy truck for, I don't know, 25 years or something before he passed away because he kept painting it. And I mean, it looked brand new from like the day he bought it. You know, he kept it, you know. So we're loading it in the back of the truck and I'm all confused. So we get in the truck and it's summertime, it's hot. And I still remember him saying, he says, all right, The lawnmower is not your gift. The lessons you're going to learn is your gift. In fact, you have to make payments to me for the lawnmower.
Wow.
Well, to a
Okay.
12-year-old boy, I'm thinking, this is just getting worse by the minute. What's going on? And he says, you're going to start a business and I'm going to show you how to do it, but you're going to do it. I'm not going to do any of it. So we get home and he shows me how to set everything up, do everything up. He says, get on down the street. You should be able to do about 5 lawns. You don't do hedges. You don't do other things. Just focus on that. Don't break their sprinklers. And your grandma's making your favorite German chocolate cake. She put way too much coconut in the frosting, and I loved it that way. And that was my birthday cake, right? And get on down the street, and it's Southern California. It's the month of August, and I'm mowing lawns, and it's 104. And I get back to the house, and I have 5 $5 bills. That was a long time ago. That's what you charge, right?
Yeah.
And I just knocked on doors and asked people if I can mow the lawn for $5. And people said, yeah, okay. And anyway, he takes one out and he goes, that's your first payment to me. He pulls another one out and he goes, you have to set this aside for more gas and blades and air filters and stuff like that. And he pulled another one out and he says, this one goes into savings. You always pay yourself first. And I'm standing there holding that and I'm thinking, it was so not worth it. I'm soaked in sweat. I'm tired, So I had to knock on a lot of doors to get 5 that would tell me yes. And it's starting to get dark. It's summertime, but it's late enough in the evening. It's starting to get dark. I remember I was falling asleep eating the dinner and the cake,
Mm-hmm.
And I took a bath, went to bed. I stayed at their house that night. And I didn't really understand what was going on. So this went on into the school year, and because lawns grow later in the year here, right? But I remember I started knocking on more doors, and he said, why don't you hire the neighbor kid to help you mow lawns? You 2 guys can do the work of 3 individuals. I ended up hiring several guys to mow lawns. And when baseball season started, they all wanted to go to practice.
Right.
Now they all played. I mean, one of them's Dino Evil. He's still coaching at the Dodgers, These other guys, they went on, but I told Grandpa I wanted to go to baseball practice. And he said, I've seen you play, son. You do okay in first base, but let's focus on business. You're good at that. And some people say that was a cruel thing to say. And I played 1 year in college first base, but I wasn't going anywhere. But flash forward, by the time I was 15, I was doing payroll every Friday. I had 2 home crews, a commercial crew. I was a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and Sunrise Landscaping was a sole proprietor business that I ran. My senior year in high school, I made more money running it part-time, not pushing any lawnmowers.
Mm-hmm.
Spending Saturdays knocking on doors when you get the list of all the new, Edison would give you a list, the electric company give you a list of all the new meter turn-ons, and they give that to the Chamber of Commerce. And if you remember, you get the list back then, because the ladies with the welcome wagon would go out with a basket of tchotchkes and coupons and stuff from all the local businesses to welcome you to the community, right? So you get that list. Then I go knock on doors and say, and Grandpa taught me, you never give them a price. We're going to mow your lawn for a month for free, once a week for a month for free. Well, how much is it? We'll talk on the other end. If they won't let you do that, don't give them a price, walk away. If they won't take it for free, walk away, right? He goes, after a month, they're not going to unpack the lawnmower. They're just going to start paying you to keep doing it. Okay. And that's your gift to them. So, boy, it worked. And then, and then he knew somebody that had a shopping center and said, hey, would you start doing the landscaping here? So my guys that I hired started doing it. So I was a high school kid with adult men as employees. Talk about changing my paradigms. Do you think I related to the other kids at school very much? My 16th birthday, I wrote a check it was a low mileage used, but it was a Chevy 4x truck with the KC lights and the rack and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
It's the coolest truck on campus in the student parking lot. And I remember the salesman looking at me and just baffled that I'm handing him a check. And he's just going along with it thinking, well, let me see where this goes. This kid in here wanting to buy this truck, because it was the one sitting out front, and it was a Ford Lincoln dealer, but they had a used car area. And he yells up to the top, in the showroom, they have a second story up there. He yells up the top to Mr. Suter, and he says, Mr. Suter, this kid's giving me a check for that Chevy truck. And old man Suter looks over and he says, is that the Brunner boy? And he says, why, yes, it is. He goes, check's good.
Wow.
I still remember the shocked look on the salesman's
I'm
face.
sure you did.
Like,
Ah,
because you remember Crocker Savings Bank? It was a Crocker Savings Bank checking account. My grandfather had to be a co-signer on the account because I wasn't 18, But you could actually back then have a checking account if there was a co-signer, an adult co-signer. I don't know if
right.
they allow that now. It was a different time. It changed my paradigms about everything. The other thing was I started buying penny stocks at 12 with money I mowed lawns for. Started reading the Wall Street Journal. And my grandmother was very good at that. And I got to know their stockbroker as well. So something else Grandpa told me very young, he said it more than once. He said, remember, a rich man plans for 3 generations. It's a poor man that plans for Saturday night.
Wow. That's
So at a
amazing.
very young age, he gave me just tremendous paradigms of how to view the world, view finances, view all these other things. A funny Marine Corps story. I joined the Marine Corps at 17. The minute I could join, mom wasn't going to sign for me to join. And the recruiters basically said, he's going to join either way. He's going to wait till his 18th birthday. Why don't you just do it now so he can go directly to boot camp, get the job he wants? Because it was avionics, and I became mechanics, hydraulics, and an air crew on helos. And so she signed. So I was in the Marine Corps, right after 17. I graduated and went straight into boot camp and stuff. Flash forward, I'm in Tennessee going to tech schools at Naval Air Station Memphis there. And the first sergeant calls me in and he gets mad at me. He says, everybody in Kansas City, that's where they process payroll and stuff back then, thinks you're dead. You haven't cashed a paycheck in 6 months. What's going on? And I says, well, I'm keeping them in my drawer. I'm saving them up for when I go home, for Christmas, right? Because we had Christmas leave at Christmas. And he goes, why would you do that? How do you live? How do you what's going on? I said, well, I have investments and stuff. I have plenty of income. And he just started asking me questions about stocks and everything else. And he says, well, I'm giving you an order. You must cash your paychecks today, all of them, and you must deposit it in the account. So here I was, this young Marine where the other guys are scraping together quarters to be able to go get a pitcher of beer, right? And I didn't have those worries, So even, it was a very different mindset, which really pushed me into a very different direction in life. I left the Marine Corps because I was in a helo crash. It was a mechanical failure, and they would have let me stay in, but they weren't going to let me fly.
Mm.
And that broke my heart. So I got out. Was an entrepreneur, built and sold several businesses, worked for several companies, went through the Avery Dennison merger. Went through some other things. I was on a team involved in that. Got involved in some M&A deals in the 90s. Got kicked in the teeth by life a couple times.
Well, that happens.
Yeah. Grandpa once said, I quote him all the time, but actually he just read a lot of Mark Twain and Will Rogers. That's why he was so wise. But he said, when you don't get what you wanted, you got experience.
Right.
That's true. It really is true. Because you learn more from your mistakes than you do your successes. You really do.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So what happened? You got out of the Marines, they wouldn't let you stay in there. So where does life take you from there?
Um, I always had a business on the side. In addition to, I did work for corporate America several times. I ended up working for a defense contractor, and my former commander, who I remained very close with after I got out, he recruited me to come work for him. And my job is cleaning up contracts that were not doing well. And sometimes they call it a hatchet man. um, I had to fire some guys once, and he came into my office and goes, how you doing? And I said, I just threw up my trash can. What do you think? And he goes, oh, that's yeah, okay, yeah, because the nerves, it was just killing me. It was stressful. And he said, if these people ever figure out what a nice guy pushover you actually are, you're done. I go, keep your mouth shut, because I am a nice guy. It really bothered me to fire somebody, even though they had it coming.
Mhm.
They were still good people. They just needed to get a little experience, right?
They needed to learn from their experiences.
Yes, they did. Yeah. And I remember one guy actually wrote him a letter and told the company, hire him back at a different contract, because we don't want to lose him. He's got skills and things he knows. He just can't be here any longer. And they did. They transferred him to Fort Carson contract. And I did that for a while, and I got burned out on the travel. There was one point for 6 months I had jet lag twice a week. I
Wow.
mean, I'd be in Germany, Italy, Japan, back to Colorado Springs, so they wanted me to go back to that schedule. And I said, enough. I mean, it was glamorous for a little while, but well, anybody's ever had a job like that travel gets old real fast. You just don't do it. And I came back, and my advisor convinced me to buy his practice. So I bought part of his book of business. The same guy's buying stocks from when I was 12. And that's how I ended up in this industry. But because of my life experience, business experience, I started trading futures and options in the 90s after going to a class when you had to go buy time on a terminal to have something that had a high enough, ping rate that you could trade, right? And now I was in Positano, Italy in July with my family, and they're all on the water. I'm on the beach club under the umbrella thing. I'm on my iPad trading. So times have changed, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And, so it's so I came into this industry with a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience that the average advisor doesn't have. So when they started training us, I was calling BS on some of the stuff the instructor was training the guys at the front of the room. And I got up and went up with my calculator, HP4, and I erased and corrected his math a couple of times. He kept using mean averages, not actual internal rate of return and stuff like that. And he got mad and stormed into the office to the other two partners. And he said, I want that guy the hell out of my class. He keeps interrupting my lesson. And I'm standing in the doorway, and he says, why don't you fix your lesson plan? And he goes, and the other two partners says, we can't kick him out of the class. Why not? He bought 1/3 of the firm the day he joined. He's a partner. And the guy says, well, this is the last time I'm teaching for you people. And he finished the lesson that day and left. And I'm thinking, well, why don't you fix your lesson plan? And I learned pretty quick in the industry, they don't want to fix those things. They train advisors to sell what they want them to sell. They train advisors to do the math the way they want them to do it. And I started questioning things that you're not supposed to question. So we had a bit of a falling out. I took 5 guys, all of our clients, and left. And that firm later in 2009 folded. And we changed our philosophies. I'd written a white paper in 2004 after reading a 1970s E.F. Hutton training manual, early 70s, 70, 71, about how Hutton made sure you had income without relying on the stock market. So when the stock portfolio was up, you could harvest the gain. When it was down, you still had a check coming every month. He called it mailbox money. And that's the reason he outperformed every other stockbroker. I mean, he and Warren Buffett's careers overlapped. Hutton outperformed Buffett all the years that Hutton was still alive and Buffett was, because he made arrangements for the client to never have to sell when it was down. Because until you book a loss, you don't have a loss, right? So if you can afford to wait, and not always, sometimes you'll sell a loser for a winner, but and sometimes you do that in tax loss harvesting, and that's other strategies, right? But I realized that when I did the analysis, his strategies from the late 50s, 60s, early 70s work better today than they did then, because the financial instruments today and the markets are more efficient today than they were then. Well, then why are not more advisors using this strategy? It's because the security broker dealer firms make half as much money if you do it that way with a client. So it's not an approved strategy. The only people that do variations of the white paper that I wrote, there's a lot of really smart people out there that are doing variations of it. Their numbers are pretty close to our Model Q, are the fiduciary RIAs, the fee-only fiduciary advisor. They will use variations of that strategy because they're focused very differently. They get to pay the same no matter what the investment money's in, right? So they want your account to grow. Your interest and the advisor's interest are aligned. But the other thing I noticed in the industry was they don't want to deal with taxes because they're afraid the advisor will say something and the client will get audited, and then they'll have a liability, right? But how do you address income and maximizing income without addressing the elephant in the room, taxation? So we had a lot of debates about that. So when I went fully independent, our focus became on, we'll match or beat the market. We'll cut your taxes in half through tax planning. And I found out pretty quick, clients never leave when you do that because their CPA's not doing that. 4 out of 5 CPAs don't even do a correct tax return. I'm not kidding.
Right.
so we have a group that we work with that has over 200 CPAs that do the tax planning part because they're actually trained in tax planning. They're certified tax business advisors. They have other designations besides the CPA. And they have tax attorneys on staff. And by partnering with them, we can cut the taxes in half or less. And that is money that stays invested, wasn't lost to the state and the feds. So the total return for the client over time following the strategy is tremendously increased by doing just those two things. And our model Q is a group of formulas that actuaries use to determine how much income, because retirement's about income, how much income a portfolio of assets will generate without ever running out of money.
Right.
All right. And they're used to calculate annuity rates and things like that, right? So it's group of formulas. That's where the Q comes from. And the model Q has two moving parts. That's it.
And those are?
We have a basket of ETFs. We used to use index funds. Now we use a highly managed basket of ETFs because it beats the index that are actively managed. And then we use an annuity, a dirty word, annuity, because most annuities suck. Most annuities shouldn't exist, should never be sold to anybody, but the good ones are very good. And it gives us a hedge against volatility with a reasonable rate of return with guaranteed income. So we can let the other securities do their job. We're never forced to sell them down market. That's it. It's not really that complex. And other advisors, feel free to read my book and copy it. Use it with your clients. I hope you do. We would all be better off if you did. So it only has two moving parts. And then we get into taxation with clients. Then we get into utilization of your various investments. Which ones do you want to use first? Which ones do you want to let ride? And when you start having that kind of a paradigm, how do we control expenses? Taxes are just an expense that can be managed. People say, well, you owe what you owe. No, not with some forethought and planning. So that's how this whole thing evolved because, something else. I don't know how much time we have.
Go ahead.
When I first became an advisor, I went to she's now my ex, but her grandfather, and great guy. He's long since gone. And he was living in a senior care facility, but he was the big personality there. And I said, I'd like to meet with 20 people that are about 80. And I just want to ask them a series of just questions. And I just want to know, what did you buy to save for retirement? And how has it worked out? How are you invested and how has it worked out over time? And what would you do differently now that you've been retired 20 years? And I was shocked to the advice. Now, he being an overachiever, he was a tremendous overachiever. I was having lunch and interviewing 2 or 3 couples or maybe a widow or a widower there that was living there. And this is a very high-end senior care facility where they lived in these bungalows and had maid service and stuff. It was a nice place. These are wealthy people. And I was having lunch there 4 days a week for 3 months, interviewing people. And consistently, I saw that they had annuities that guaranteed income and they had other investments. And that just confirmed the whole Model Q thing.
Wow.
Consistently. Or maybe they had real estate that had ongoing rental income that was professionally managed, and then they had other investments. And they would harvest those other investments, stocks and stuff, stock market stuff when it was up, let it ride when it wasn't. And it was just, how did it actually work out? So everybody talks about in theory, go talk to somebody on the other end of that and see how it worked out.
Yeah.
And I was questioning what they used to train advisors. They don't talk about it as much anymore. But they used to have something called the 4% rule. You pull 4% of whatever your account value is every year, you'll never run out. That's actually doesn't true because it doesn't address the risk of sequence of returns. So imagine if you retired in 2006, started pulling 4%. 2009, you had to go back to work. Walmart or something, right? Home Depot, right? See? So what are the things we can control? What are the things we can't control? We can't control the sequence the returns are going to happen in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what if you retired in 98? Then 2000 through 2003, the market went down all 3 years. Well, that standard model didn't work out for you.
Right.
In fact, historically, that model it fails by 40% in 1 out of 3 scenarios. It's break even to my model Q in 1 out of 3 scenarios. And it only beats it by about 10% over time, 10% total return in 1 out of 3. So you have a 1 in 3 chance of the parachute not opening when you jump.
Right.
And we don't know which one you're going to be till the other end. So I need to have a hedge against that. What is the hedge against that? And that's using a good annuity. I have to emphasize 9 out of 10 shouldn't be sold to anybody, shouldn't exist. They're a bad product all the way around. The good ones are very, very good for very specific reasons. And then you have to have somebody to manage the portfolio that has a very solid, disciplined model.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't deviate from the model. You don't panic. All right.
Right.
And that's the other thing people do is they panic. So when you start thinking this way about income and expenses, you do things like you don't pay off the mortgage early. I don't care what Dave Ramsey says. If you got a 3.5% mortgage, don't take 8% money to pay off 3.5% money.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Right.
I did make my last mortgage payment last March. It was very nice. But and I understand the psychology of how that makes you feel better. But is it the highest and best use of those dollars, right?
Right.
So you have to think about expenses, and taxes are an expense, and you have to think about these other things. So there's some nuance to it, but the strategy model Q basically has 2 moving parts, and it works.
When we were talking on the phone a while back, you explained to me, with today's economy is crazy, obviously, but you explained to me 2 different modes. There's the survival mode and the non-survival mode. Explain that for what you mean by that. Some people may go, I think it's all survival. We're all just trying to survive right now. Explain that a little bit.
Survival mode's paycheck to paycheck. Survival mode is where you don't really understand what's going on with your assets. When you don't understand those things, you're just getting by. And at the end of the month, you total things up, and you buy more top ramen when you run out, and you buy more steaks when you don't, of cash. And that's just trying to get by. And many people are in that mode because they don't think they can be in a different place. They don't really believe it. They don't understand that you can suck it up for 2 years to front load the process. Tuck your pride a little bit, buy that Toyota Camry instead of the Mercedes 350, right?
Mm-hmm.
Camry's a much more dependable car, by the way. You'll burn through 3 Mercedes before you wear out that Camry. So stop trying to impress people you don't even know. Buy your shirt at Costco. I think this was $19.
Right.
And suck it up for a couple of years. And you can get out of that survival mode. And once you understand how these things work, and it doesn't take it, you don't have to, people say, oh, I'm not good at that. I didn't do well in math class, stuff like that. None of that's required. I carried a 3.4 at university. I was nobody's honor roll student. All right. Had to have a tutor to pass calculus. So, yeah, I mean, I'm being honest. That was second try at the class. To have a tutor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I had to withdraw, then enroll again, right? No, read. Clients will tell me I don't have time to figure this out. To not be in survival mode, to be in the other mode, I said, well, and I'll give you a hard time right now. I know a way to make a 10-minute phone call that'll give you 20 extra hours a week to do anything you want.
Okay.
It'll add 20 hours of free time to the average person's week, at least 12 hours of free time, the average week. Now, you can read a book in 12 hours and learn how to do something, right?
Right.
Okay. It's a 10-minute phone call. Let's make the phone call. Do you want that extra time? Well, yeah.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to call the cable company and turn it on.
And people have a heart attack sometimes when you say that, right?
Yeah, they look at me like, oh, yeah, yeah, you're right. See? So when somebody says, I don't have time to learn something, what they really mean is something else is a higher priority.
Hmm.
Okay. So
Exactly.
none of this is rocket science. None of it's that difficult. Um, Suck it up, maybe 6 months. And Dave Ramsey gives a lot of bad advice on how to invest on the back end. His math is very, very sketchy. But he does give good advice on the front end. Don't buy a car you can't afford. Buy low mileage used. If it's 2 years old and got 20,000 miles on it, you know if it has any recalls. You know if it's a
Uh-huh.
dependable model, right? You know, and buy a Toyota from a Toyota dealer. Don't buy it off some other lot because you don't know what you're getting, right? So we're not saying you go buy a junk used car. Buy a certified one, but buy a low mileage used. Don't rack up the credit cards. The travel points aren't worth it. The math doesn't work out. Very few cards have any of that much anymore. It just isn't worth it. Don't buy more house than you need.
Hmm.
My he's now my number 2 wealthiest client. Lives in a modest neighborhood in Whittier, California. Is worth about $600 million, and his kids don't know it. He drives a Toyota pickup that's 20 years old, still looks new. His wife drives a Camry. It's about the same age. There is a local charity that only 2 members of the board know that he funds the entire thing. But he shows up on Saturday to sweep the floors and clean, and even cleans the bathrooms. They just think he's the best volunteer.
Uh-huh.
You understand?
Hmm.
And they're very happy. Now, the kids are starting to figure a few things out because they've been taking some pretty nice vacations now that he's retired. But people get a pay raise and they spend more. And they get a pay raise and they spend more. And they get the idea that, well, I deserve it.
Hmm.
No, you don't. Yeah. So survival mode is paycheck to paycheck because you have a paycheck to paycheck mentality. And you're buying things you can't afford, buying things to impress people you don't even know. But on the other side of that, you only got to read about 3 books and you'll get it together. You really will.
Right.
You will.
Yeah, you said something, when you're talking about survival mode, and you were lucky in that you were educated at a young age
Yeah.
by your grandfather at 12. So he really taught you. A lot of people don't have that. They're not fortunate enough to have that kind of lesson in life that luckily
No,
that you had.
no.
So what about somebody's, let's say today, let's just throw it out there as an example, but with the craziness that's going on, maybe somebody does have some retirement set aside through their job with a private employer or government or whatever,
Yes.
and things have happened, and now they're faced with this survival mode they didn't see coming, right? They didn't anticipate losing their job just out of the blue, but they do have some kind of something over here that's just kind of sitting there, and maybe they're contemplating because it's a survival mode. They're thinking, do I need to touch that now because I'm just trying to survive? What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's in that type of situation right now?
Instead of stressing about it, sit back and make a game out of it. You talked about gamify things.
Yeah.
Make a game out of things. Um, I have a cousin who went to a city auction to buy the cheapest vehicle he could find. He'd been living out of the country, came back. He got for $900 this Chevy Astrovan that had one bench seat in back. It was meant to haul tools in the back for maintenance crews, right? And he was single, but it ran on natural gas. But there are places to get natural gas, and it's not hard to find. And he wanted to make a game to see what his cost per mile for the vehicle would be. Just he gamified it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a guy that could have just wrote a check for a McLaren, but he made a game out of how cheap per mile will I get out of this vehicle. He made a game out of it, and people joked because he was driving this van. He got like 9 years out of that van.
Wow.
Yeah. He made a game out of it to see how cheap it could be. So kind of make it a game of how can I get by for a week on this much?
Mhm.
Okay, we're going to cook at home. We're going to go see a movie, but we're not going to buy the popcorn. We're not going to buy anything else. We're going to eat at home before we go. I'm going to make my own coffee. I'm not going to buy the Starbucks, which is probably healthier anyway, right? And we're not saying have no fun, but rather than go out to dinner on Saturday night, go a little early with a picnic basket to the park and take the dog and lay back and have a conversation. Maybe bring a board game and have an evening like that rather than going to the restaurant, right? So what I'm saying is make it a game of how much can we enjoy this, but spend nothing. And I'm not talking about being cheap. I'm not talking about going off the deep end. But if you make a budget and make it a game of hitting this number, it actually kind of becomes fun after a while. So when you find yourself in a crisis and you're all stressed out, pull back and say, how can I, how can I look at this differently? I saw a display it was a Facebook little video thing, and it showed 3 circles that look like a target.
Mm-hmm.
And it said, but when you look at them from the side, it turns out they're 3-dimensional. The smaller one was, right? But it was the same image looking at it from a different angle. Then it showed it a third way, right? Step back, go 90 degrees and look at the problem from an entirely different direction. And all of a sudden, because you didn't know looking front on that the 3 rings that look like a target looking at them this way, right?
Right.
When you turned it sideways, there was a ring, and a ring, right? And so much of life is the same way. When you have a problem like that, stop, take a deep breath. You just got laid off from your job. You don't have a lot in savings. You got some money in a 401k. What are we going to do? Step back and look at it from a different direction. Maybe find a mentor and say, I'm not asking you for money. I'm actually asking you for advice. I'm just, what would you do? Somebody that's been successful financially, what would you do? Call me, man. You buy me a double at In-N-Out, and you'd be surprised how much free advice I'll give you just for a double at In-N-Out. And like you said, gamify the situation, make a game out of it, and get the whole family on board. And we're gonna do this, and here's what we're gonna do, and here's how we're gonna get through this. Let's find a fun way to find alternatives to these things, because you don't want to just hunker down at home and stare at the TV and not do anything. Do that out of fear. That's a fear response to the situation. And the more fear you have, the more fear you will, because our brains reinforce our thought patterns, right? Mm-hmm. So if you take that fear thought pattern and instead look at it from another angle and make a game out of it, you'll not only get through that crisis, you'll learn some self-discipline and some skills. And by the way, taking some sandwiches and some lemonade to the park to play Frisbee with the kids instead of going to the theater and the restaurant, long term, the kids will remember the evening and the afternoon in the park long after they forgot about the movie they saw, right?
Right. Because that's something that the money can't buy. Money can't buy those memories.
No. I remember my parents on Saturday nights, we went to different people's houses and they had these canasta clubs. Canasta is a card game.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us kids would play while the parents played canasta. And it was a potluck. They called it a potluck. Everybody brought something. And everybody ate together. Because everybody, where we were, everybody had 5, 6, 7, 8 kids. My parents had 8. And 4 boys, 4 girls, and start doing those kinds of things.
Right.
And you'd be surprised, one, how much money you'll save, how much richer your life will become. And then if you're not reading a book a month, and I don't mean a novel, read novels, they're fun, but something that is taking you towards your goals, then you need to really reevaluate your time. People say, well, I don't have time. Well, you have time. You do.
Yeah.
You're just doing something else with the time.
I remember you're familiar with who Bob Proctor is, correct?
I love Bob Proctor.
Yeah. So I remember watching an interview with him one time, and it was a question, it was a question about learning and about reading because Bob read all the time. I mean, if you
Yeah.
knew Bob, you understand. If you studied Bob, he read, constantly reading.
Yeah.
And the response he gave was, when you stop reading, you stop growing, and when you stop growing, you stop learning, and therein is the problem. So, getting
Yeah.
back to your point about picking up a book that's going to educate you in some form or fashion, and like you said, a novel is great. It's great to have a novel, but also take the time to build yourself up, learn something new about something you didn't know about yourself.
Yeah.
You know,
People think freedom is having the ability to just do whatever you want, whenever you want, no consequences and all this, and money and all these other things. But you only get there in a couple of ways. One is you inherit the money, which means you're probably a pretty miserable person. I had some cousins inherited a lot of money, and they're all trust fund babies and cushy lives, everything. They're running out of money,
mm-hmm.
because they wasted because they didn't earn it. True freedom comes from discipline. True freedom
Definitely.
comes from discipline, and it's counterintuitive. You think, well, if I'm disciplined, then I'm doing this and doing this and doing this, and that's taking up my free time and stuff. No, it is the discipline that provides the freedom. Without the discipline, those cousins of mine, when the money's gone, they don't know how to replace it.
Right, right. And I guess that's right. Comes down to the same lines of, somebody who's won millions and millions of dollars through the lottery, and 3 or 4 years down the road, they don't have anything left because they never learned how to handle it. They didn't learn the discipline that went along with it. And like you said, they didn't earn it even.
How much time do we have?
Oh, we've still got plenty of time. We're good. We're good.
Good choice. All right, let's play a game.
All right.
Okay. All right. You see that?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Name an asset.
A house.
House. Okay. Name another asset.
Stocks.
Name another asset.
A vehicle.
You notice I'm only writing in one quadrant.
Yes, I see that.
What other kinds of assets are there?
There are all kinds of assets.
Is health an asset?
Definitely.
If you lose
got
it,
it, 'cause-
you'll wish, yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that because I got to meet David Gilmore, who's the founder of Fiji Water, and his comment was, you could have everything in the world, but if you don't have your health, you don't have anything.
No. Yeah, a lot of people will spend their health gaining their wealth and then deplete their wealth because of their bad health, right? So
Right?
is family an asset?
Definitely.
Not always. Sometimes they're not, but
Well, it depends.
depends
Yeah.
on the family, right?
For the most part, family is an asset,
Is your spiritual beliefs an asset?
Definitely.
Yeah. Or faith. Okay. All right. You see the other assets there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is knowledge an asset?
Definitely.
Is experience an asset?
Got to have experience. Yes.
Yeah. You got to learn that if you touch the stove, it was hot, it'll be hot the next time you touch it too. So most of us have to touch it about 3 times before we learn that it's hot. Myself included. Okay.
Right.
All right. So these are intellectual assets.
Okay.
All right. Notice there's still another quadrant.
Right.
Are taxes an asset?
Taxes an asset. That's a good question. I wouldn't know how to answer if taxes are an asset or not.
When you dial 911, does somebody come?
Yes. So I guess I'll take that. Yeah.
Are the roads pretty good for the most part? Potholes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a few.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have schools, good or bad? They are schools, right?
They are schools. Yes.
All right. Government wastes an awful lot of money, but who's got the best military in the world? Hands down.
The government. Yeah. U.S. Yeah. Government.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I tell you what, you deploy a division of Marines off the coast from someplace, they want to talk to you real quick.
Yeah, they do. Right?
Okay.
We're not here to make friends.
No.
You would know that.
By the way, you ever notice they don't send the Marines on humanitarian missions? They send other things. You send the Marines when you want to get stuff blown up.
There you go. There you go. That's good. That's good. I
So,
like that.
yeah, that's yeah. So, but so taxes are an asset. But did you know you can redirect otherwise payable taxes to other things? It's a
Okay.
choice where that money goes.
All
Is
right.
living in America an asset?
I would definitely say yes.
Okay. I mean, you don't see people, even the ones that sneak into Europe are still trying to get a green card to come here, right?
Right.
So the fact that people are willing to go across 200 miles of desert and risk coyotes and everything else and human smugglers to get here, they're not sneaking into, Venezuela. They're not,
Right.
they might sneak into Canada, but they're still trying to get here usually, right? So
Sure.
as much as we complain, we're still, it's bad, but it's the best of the bad, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
So
I agree with
where
that.
we live, the fact that we were born in America, born healthy with above average intelligence, we are blessed. There are about 5 billion people that would trade places with you, including your problems, tomorrow.
Hmm.
So stop complaining. Okay. Could it be better? Yes. Should we make it better? Yes. We should work for it to be better, but don't complain. But
Yeah.
if you woke up tomorrow and you had to give up one of these quadrants, your money and your assets, your house, your real estate, your 401k, your stock portfolio, or your health, your family, your spiritual, all those things, or your knowledge, all right, your intellectual assets, your education, all those things stay with you forever, or living in America. So you woke up tomorrow morning and the angel of death is standing at the foot of your bed. So after you soil yourself,
All right.
he says, I am here to take one of these categories. You can keep the other three. Only one. It's gone forever. You can keep the other three. Which one would you give him?
I'd give up my money
Why?
because I like the intellectual property. I like my family. I
Because
like
with
my
these
faith.
other assets, you can replace the money, right?
Right.
The money here. You can replace it. Then why are we spending so much time focused on the money and not giving equal time to the others?
Very good.
If you give equal time to all four areas, and when I talk about the civic, what is equal time to the civic? If you don't volunteer 4 hours once a month somewhere, go down to your church and pack up those boxes with all the food and the canned goods and stuff for the early Saturday morning people that come by from the food kitchen. Do something. Habitat for Humanity. I love Habitat for Humanity.
Hmm.
When my girls were young, we used to go on Saturdays, and sometimes we were just literally spreading manure so they were planting the lawn. Sometimes we were painting. We would do something there. Okay.
Right.
So if you're not giving something to each one of those categories, then you don't have a well-rounded plan. You don't. So you need to hand down knowledge to your children. People think, well, I need to give them money. If you don't give them the knowledge and to hold on and to manage what they're going to inherit, they're just going to squander it.
Right.
So how about you create a situation that even if it's lost for some reason, they know how to replace it?
Hmm.
My grandfather would take all of us when we were 5 to the library to get a library card.
Yeah. Remember those.
So I don't want to get choked up. I'm going to be 60 and I still miss that man. Okay. I still remember the warm card after being laminated. He went to J.C. Penney's and the boys all got a wallet. The girls got a purse. And I remember sliding that little wallet and putting my first wallet in my pocket. And I remember the speech because he was an immigrant. He said, with this library card, you can do or be anything you'll ever want to do or be. And in America, it's free.
That's profound.
Yeah.
Wow.
How many of you watching this podcast own a library card? Mine down here is digital on my phone, but
Right.
the library. But how many? So you say, well, I can't afford to buy all these books. Library card's free.
Right.
Okay.
You said something real quick. You were talking about, and I want to bring this up because we talked about this earlier, And that is the younger generation that's coming up and teaching the kids. You told me a story, I think it was about your son. You were having a yard sale. You want to touch on that because I think it's very interesting because you got to be careful because somebody is watching you doing what you're doing. So you want to tell us about that?
He went through all of his toys. He's a little spoiled in some ways. He's my boy and he's my favorite, and I make no bones about it. And just too bad. That's just the way it is. And no, he and I we have a natural thing. We just get along. So he's very entrepreneurial. So we went through, and I said, half of what's in here's got to go. You choose what half. Put it all together. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to put together packages. You're not going to sell. He had a massive collection of Matchbox cars and Hot Wheels cars, mostly Matchbox because they're more interesting, right? And he had the tracks and the slingshot thing that makes it go through the loop. Remember those and all that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to sell these things as package deals. You're not going to sell them one car. It's 25 cents a car or $5 for $1. He and I had a quick conversation about that. And this is your store, and here's what you're going to get. He made several $100s that day.
Wow.
He was working it. So when somebody would come and look through, because there were 3 households here on our street, all having one garage sale and one yard and driveway and stuff, right? He would walk out and ask the person, do you have kids? Do you have grandkids? Any of them would you like to see this car collection here? And he would bring them over to the table where he had staged everything and made it like a store. And I don't remember exactly how much he made that day. He sold all of it, I'll tell you that. So some of his clothes that he had there, he organized them with a pair of pants and a shirt and a pair of shoes that matched. And you had to buy the whole thing. He just wasn't going to sell you the shirt, right? And we didn't have much of a conversation about it. And he figured that out because we've had these kind of entrepreneurial conversations for a long time. And he's very proud of himself.
Did you talk to him afterwards about, what he did? I mean, like you said, you really weren't too sure, but he just did this. And the way he did it was he had thought about this process way in advance. Did you have a conversation with him afterwards about it?
Yes. Now, the initial conversation was not even a minute long. Here's what you need to do in this closet. Because it's all very organized. We're all OCD. Right. We're a family full of OCD people. So everything's in a place in our house. So my wife and I joke, we had to marry each other because nobody else could live with us. We're just like that, right? So anyway, I fit in the Marine Corps very well. I already knew how to make hospital corners, and I already knew how to shine boots. I already knew how to iron and stuff. They had me teaching the other guys how to do that stuff in boot camp. I liked it, by the way, all the organization. So, but his closet was very organized, but it was crowded. It was time to start thinning it out because he was getting past the age for some of these toys and stuff. So we told him that, and then he pulled out what he wanted to part with, right? And then the conversation of how to sell it, the idea, I didn't say much. The rest of it, he pieced together himself. And for a couple of reasons. One, he and I play chess at least twice a week. Why the game of chess? Because it teaches you to think 5 moves ahead every piece on the board. That is a discipline that everybody needs, whether you're good at chess or not, because it teaches you about life. And I'm always saying to him what Grandpa always said to me. Grandpa said it so much I can still hear that slight Swiss accent talking in my ear. He'd say, son, everything in life is a process. Think through the steps in the process. He's always teaching you to think 3 steps ahead of whatever decision you're making. And he said it so much it irritated us as kids. We had no idea the value of that. So I'm always telling my son, and he'll say, yeah, the steps in the process. Yeah, he'll finish my words, right? He's a respectful child, but he gets annoyed hearing it. But why did this happen with him? Because that is all he knows. From a very early age, it was all I knew. So we had a conversation afterwards, and he told me the other things he was doing. The clothing thing was his idea. And there were clothes that were in great shape. He just outgrown them, right? Mm-hmm. And so there were several things he did there that were his idea on his own. I just kind of lit the match and let's see where it goes. Right.
Right. Right.
And he talks about investing all the time. He's very interested in those things.
Well, I think that's important. It's one of those deals, and I admire and I respect teachers because they go through a lot. I mean, especially today, there's so much pressure on them. The old adage of, working 40 hours a week for 40 years to retire on 40% of which you can't even make it on now,
Yeah.
That whole process. But there's what we're talking about here today, and what you're talking about with your son is something that is a missing piece that's not being taught in the education system or in life in general.
He wants an electric dirt bike, these new electric that are
Yeah.
all electric motorcycles, right? Dirt bikes. He wants us to get a match set of them and spend time together out in the woods, riding up in the hills and stuff. I said, okay, you're going to have to put together a plan. What's the best bike? What's the best value? What is the range? What is the maximum speed? All these other things. You need to do some research. We're not just going to go buy some bike, okay? And you're going to have to understand it because once we make this purchase, you're going to own it. And it's going to need repairs and it's going to need things. And what are the cost of the tires? What are the costs of those things? You're going to hit a cactus out there. So at some point, you're going to need to repair that tire. And so we're going to need to buy extra parts when we buy the bike. So we have parts ready to go. So he and I had a conversation about that. And I says, here's what you're going to need to do. You're going to need to put this in a report to me. What brands, where are they made? When does it arrive? What are the add-ons? What are the modifications? Everything else. What is the price for it? What battery size to have? Because we need to have about 100 miles of range in case we decide to spend all day Saturday out there, right? Go up to the top of the range and have a picnic up there on top and then come back down, right? You could knock out 20, 25 miles real easily. So if you're going to do 25 miles in the day, you better have 50 miles worth of battery range. Because battery isn't like just putting gas in the tank, Right. And they're heavy. You don't want to have to push one of those, right? So think through this scenario when we're out there having fun. Come back to me with a report. He knows the best bikes. He says, no, we don't want to buy that one with that battery. We can buy it with a second battery and keep that on the bike. And the two batteries together give you the 100 miles range for less than buying the 100-mile range battery. And now you got two batteries. And he thought through all of this and priced it out and worked out the whole model. By the way, here's the cost of tires in this one. Here's the cost of tires in this one. Here's the rim you want because those tires, it's a little larger rim, but the tires are less expensive. It's a more common size. This other one looks cool, but it's a custom tire. It's more expensive when you got to replace it. He's 11 years old. He knows the exact bike, exact color, what battery, what options, what parts, what maintenance is needed. So the bike will be here in about 3 weeks. So there's two of them. I had to get the larger one because I'm big, And so when your children want something, make a project out of it. Have them do their due diligence. Have them look into it. And you'll raise a child that when it's time to go buy a car, he's reading up on all the specs, to find out which cars had recalls, which ones hasn't. Maybe I should get the low mileage used just in case, stuff like that, right? It just becomes, it's habits. Everything's habits. I had an employee that was a great employee. I used to own a business brokerage. And I had this employee, we'll call her Veronica. She was good. She's very good. She was consistently 15 minutes late. And the Monday after time change, I thought, okay, she'll be on time today at least. Because, you wake up and you have an extra hour, on Sunday. That carries over into Monday. You ever notice after the time change, you tend to get up a little early easier. Nope, she was exactly 15 minutes late. I could never convince her that 15 minutes late is the same habit as 15 minutes early. It's the same habit. So everything goes back to habits. It really does. Everything in life goes back to habits. Are you going to be successful financially? What are your habits around money?
And I think what you can allude to also is the fact that you can always have a starting point, right? You can always start where you're at now.
Yes.
Because some
every
people
morning the sun comes up. You can't change yesterday. The only thing you can change is tomorrow.
Right. This has been a very educational. The way you explain everything. This is why we talked. The gamify. You just make it seem like obviously it's a serious thing when you're talking about finance. It's serious, but it doesn't have to be serious when you're trying to learn it. And I think that's one thing that's really been understood throughout our conversation is that you've made it fun. You've made it exciting. You've made it something that people can engage in. How can people, I know you've got a book. Let's talk about that real quick. Tell us about the book.
Just say no to bad financial advice. There's one chapter in there. Let me. It now has a golden seal here on Amazon because it's an Amazon bestseller.
Awesome.
And if you just went to Amazon and typed in Kevin Brunner, it's spelled like B Runner. And Christian Ramsey's my co-author. He runs our RIA, Registered Investment Advisory Firm. He's our money manager in-house. There's one chapter in there that securities broker dealer firms, if they ever read that, they'd never sign us. I'll tell you that because we pull back the curtain. And because people should know these things, they should understand. I'm not saying never invest with one because some investments are purchased through those, but you need to understand more deeply. But it's an easy read. If you're a little older, the text is something I can read without putting on my reading glasses. Okay. I had an editor go through and rewrite parts of a lot of the paragraphs in here because I wanted it to be not simplified, but written in a way that somebody that isn't experienced in the financial industry would choose different words to describe things, right? And honestly, he improved the book. Because we're in the industry, so we tend to have a paradigm when we're writing stuff. Actually, he shortened it by about 12 pages by rewriting, simplifying some stuff. But in the book, we talk about these different strategies, how these things work, and how to focus on income, not return. Return is very important. You have to have return. But when you hit a certain age, if you're not investing for income, maximizing income, you're chasing return. When return's not there, you're screwed, right?
Right.
So, and how to separate the two, how to separate the buckets of your money as well. And that cutting your taxes is for everybody. There are tremendous parts of the tax code that are very flexible. Oh no, if you made the money, you got to pay the tax. Not necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And why did Congress put those things in there? Because they want you to do those things. They want you to invest because it's better for the economy. They want you to defer and keep the money working in the economy because, we always, by the way, on the politician thing, we always think politicians are stupid. No, we'd be safer if they were. They know exactly what they're doing. So, but they do put stuff. Unfortunately, they do. So they do put stuff in the tax code to encourage these things. Find out what it is. And we talk about those things in the book, and we make some of the topics not quite so scary. If you're an entrepreneur and you own a business, when you go to exit, you're going to get hammered on taxes. What's your solution for that? Change the nature of the distribution of the transaction. If it's called something else, legally, it's perfectly legal to do this. You just have to work with generally somebody more than a CPA that knows tax planning and how to do that. I'm a certified tax and business advisor. So it's one of the designations. I don't throw all the designations out there all the time because most of them was a class and a test and then you get it, Doesn't mean you're really truly competent in it. But have a paradigm that way. And it's only tough for a little while. Then on the other side of it, two scenarios. One, you got $100,000 in savings, plus your 401k has been max funded for about 10 years. The other one, you don't have either one. And both people get laid off from the same company. Which one's going to take a week off before he starts looking for work? And which one went home that night and had a panic attack?
Exactly.
You see, with discipline comes freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Always. So I hope I answered the question. I kind of went down a rabbit.
Yeah, no, that's great. There's been so much in this before we wrap things up, there's one question I do want to. You touched on entrepreneurs real quick. What do you think one of the biggest financial mistakes that entrepreneurs make when they're just starting on their venture? What is one big mistake that you see often?
Too much debt, trying to get there too quickly. You know, show up on Saturday and clean the bathroom yourself. Don't hire a janitor until your expenses got there. Thinking I've put in all these hours, I deserve something, so they start pulling more out of the business than they should, sooner than they should. Relying too much on their CPA. That's a big problem. It really is. For example, I'm not knocking CPAs. I'm really not. But if the question is about cardiology, why are you talking to your dentist? He's a good dentist. He gives you that little shot, you barely feel it. I mean, you leave there after a tooth cleaning and it's like glass. Your teeth are like glass. They're just awesome, you know? He filled that cavity and you hardly felt it, right? He's a great dentist. What are you bugging about cardiology for? It's a different part of medicine. So you have to be careful who you ask a question of. Because either way, you're going to get an answer. So what's most important is who you're going to ask the question. So a lot of entrepreneurs don't have good mentorship. Talk to a guy that's been successful and one that got kicked in the teeth at least once.
Right.
He'll have some wisdom.
You had a great one in your grandfather. He taught you a lot about the world.
He really did.
You know, so, you know, this has been great, Kevin. I just want to give you the last word. You know, we've covered a lot. We've had a lot of fun with this conversation. This has really been good. But what's something that you would like everyone to take away from our interview here today? Something that will guide them either down in the right step or something that a mentor said to you. What's something you want to leave the audience with?
Look forward to the day that you can do something to help somebody. And make sure they never know you did it. Don't tell a soul.
Do it in private.
And stand back and watch.
That's awesome.
And
That's
never
awesome.
tell anybody what you did. The satisfaction that gives you. Desire to be in that position at some point in your life. Because somebody helped you. Many people helped you. That algebra teacher stayed after class 3 times to help you make sure you're going to pass the final. Right? That was his own time, her own time. Somebody pulled you aside and mentored you and gave you good advice. Somebody gave you a shot because they believed in you. You have an obligation to be in a position to pay that forward. Grandpa used to say, we need to leave this world better than we found it. Okay? And if that is your ultimate goal, to be in that kind of a position, the satisfaction that brings you, I promise you it's good. So the other side of discipline, the other side of the work, it's beautiful. It really is. If you're a grandparent and you're not spending time with the grandkids, doing projects, just teaching the kid how to turn a wrench, teaching them how to do certain things. If you're not spending that time with them, you're not paying the wisdom forward. By the time you get to 60, 70, 80, they need you. They really do. If you don't have grandchildren, adopt some. I'm sure there's a single mother down the street that would love to have somebody that would just spend a few minutes with the kids so she could get the dishes done. Okay. So, our goal in life is to be in a position to pay it forward because we've all lived blessed lives. If you're here in America, you're blessed right there. You're born on third base. Okay. So you really were. And that should be the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal.
Right. All right. Well, Kevin, how can our audience get in contact with you, find out more information about you?
KevinBrunner.com.
Well, that's pretty easy.
Yeah.
That's it, man.
Yes,
Nothing complicated with that.
No, there's videos and there's 3 books you can buy. There's other stuff. You can set an appointment. I don't charge for initial And sometimes people, there's not much I can do for you right now because of where you're at. I'll point out a book to read. I'll point out a few things to spend a little time with you, and I'll give you a couple of goals to achieve. And when you've achieved those, call me back. Then I'll give you the next set of goals, and might tell you you need to disconnect the cable.
There you go. That's how we all started. That's
Yeah.
how we all started.
I know. Yes.
All right. Well, Kevin, again, I want to thank you very much for
Thank you.
spending time with us. It's been great. It's been enlightening. And we'll definitely make sure you have everybody has all the contact information in the show notes. But again, thank you very much for spending time with us.
Thank you.
All right. And for those of you watching, be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our real movement is only going to grow by you subscribing and sharing this message. I'm Deston Rogers. Join us again for another episode of Eagle Freedom Presents.
To learn more about our mission and become a part of #Real Movement, visit eaglefreedompresents.com. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who needs a beacon of hope. If you know someone who has an amazing story of overcoming, send us an email to eaglefreedompresents@gmail.com. And remember our mantra: rise, inspire, overcome. Podcast distribution for Eagle Freedom Presents provided by Podetize. Visit podetize.com for all your podcast needs.